Kindly go through all the pages of the chapter before you start reading. Chapter 1 Introduction Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Take a look at maps 1 and 2. Map 1 was made in 1154 century by the Arab geographer Al-Idrisi. The section reproduced here is a detail of the Indian subcontinent from his larger map of the world. Map 2 was made in the 1720s by a French cartographer. The two maps are quite different even though they are of the same area. In Al-Idrisi's map, South India is where we would expect to find North India and Sri Lanka is the island at the top. Place names are marked in Arab. And there are some well-known names like Kanuj in Uttar Pradesh, spelt in the map as Qanauj, Kanuj. Map 2 was made nearly 600 years after Map 1. During this period, information about the subcontinent had changed considerably. This map seems more familiar to us, and the coastal areas in particular are surprisingly detailed. This map was used by European sailors and merchants on their voyages. Equally important is the fact that the signs of the cartography differed in the two periods. When historians read documents, maps, and texts from the past, they have to be sensitive to the different historical backgrounds, the context in which information about the past was produced, new and old terminologies. In the context in which information is produced changes with time. What about language and meanings? Historical records exist in a variety of languages which have changed considerably over the years. Medieval Persian, for example, is different from modern Persian. The difference is not just with regard to grammar and vocabulary. The meanings of the words also change over time. Take the term Hindustan, for example. Today we understand it as India, the modern nation state. When the term was used in the 13th century by Minhaj-e-Siraj, a chronicler who wrote in Persian, he meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana, and the lands between the Ganga and Yamuna. He used the term in a political sense for lands that were a part of the dominions of the Delhi Sultan. The areas included in this term shifted with the extent of the Sultanate, but the term never included South India. By contrast, in the early 16th century, Babur used Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna, and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. As we will see later in the chapter, this was somewhat similar to the way the 14th century poet Amir Khusru used the word Hind. While the idea of the geographical and cultural entity like India did exist, the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meanings which we associate with it today. Historians today have to be careful about the terms they use because they meant different things in the past. Take, for example, a simple term like foreigner. It is used today to mean someone who is not an Indian. In the medieval period, a foreigner was any stranger who appeared, say, in a given village, someone who was not a part of that society or culture. In Hindi, the term Pardesi might be used to describe such a person, and in Persian, Ajnabi. A city dweller, therefore, might have regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner, but two peasants living in the same village were not foreigners to each other, even though they may have had different religious or caste backgrounds. Historians and their sources. Historians use different types of sources to learn about the past depending upon the period of their study and the nature of their investigation. Last year, for example, you read about the rulers of Gupta dynasty and Harshavardhana. In this book, we will read about the following 1,000 years from roughly 700 to 1750. You will notice some continuity in the sources used by historians for the study of this period. They still rely on coins, inscriptions, architecture, and textual records for information. But there is also considerable discontinuity. The number and variety of textual records increased dramatically during this period. They slowly displaced other types of available information. Through this period, paper gradually became cheaper and more widely available. People used it to write holy texts, chronicles of rulers, letters and teaching of saints, petitions and judicial records, and for registers of accounts and taxes. Manuscripts were collected by wealthy people rulers, monasteries, and temples. They were placed in libraries and archives. These manuscripts and documents provide a lot of detailed information to historians, but they are also difficult to use. There was no printing press in those days, so scribes copied manuscripts by hand. If you have ever copied a friend's homework, you would know that this is not a simple exercise. Sometimes you cannot read your friend's handwriting and are forced to guess what is written. As a result, there are small but significant differences in your copy of your friend's work. Manuscript copying is somewhat similar. As scribes copied manuscripts, they also introduced small changes, a word here, a sentence there. These small differences grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of the same text became substantially different from one another. This is a serious problem because we rarely find the original manuscripts of the author today. We are totally dependent upon the copies made by later scribes. As a result, historians have to read different manuscript versions of the same text to guess what the author had originally written. On occasion, authors revise their chronicles at different times. The 14th century chronicler Ziauddin Bharani wrote his chronicle first in 1356 and another version 2 years later. The two differ from each other, but historians did not know about the existence of the first version until the 1960s. It remained lost in large library collections. New social and political groups. The study of 1000 years between 700 and 1750 is a huge challenge to historians, largely because of the scale and variety of developments that occurred over the period. At different moments in this period, new technologies made their appearance, like the Persian wheel in irrigation, the spinning wheel in weaving, and firearms in combat. New foods and beverages arrived in the subcontinent: potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee. Remember that all these innovations, new technologies, and crops came along with people who brought other ideas with them as well. As a result, this was a period of economic, political, social, and cultural changes. You will learn about some of these changes in Chapter 5. This was also a period of great mobility. Groups of people traveled long distances in search of opportunity. The subcontinent held immense wealth and the possibilities for people to carve a fortune. One group of people who became important in this period were the Rajputs, a name derived from Rajaputra, the son of a ruler. Between the 8th and 14th centuries, the term was applied more generally to a group of warriors who claimed Kshatriya caste status. The term included not just rulers and chieftains, but also soldiers and commanders who served in the armies of different monarchs all over the subcontinent. A chivalric code of conduct, extreme valor, and a great sense of loyalty were the qualities attributed to Rajputs by their poets and bards. Other groups of people, such as the Marathas, Sikhs, Jats, Ahoms, and Kayasthas, a caste of scribes and secretaries, also used the opportunities of the age to become politically important. Throughout this period, there was a gradual clearing of forests and the extension of agriculture, a change faster and more complete in some areas than in others. Changes in their habitat forced many land and become peasants. Changes in their habitat forced many forest dwellers to migrate. Others started tilling the land and became peasants. These new peasant groups gradually began to be influenced by regional markets, chieftains, priests, monasteries, and temples. They became a part of large, complex societies and were required to pay taxes and offer goods and services to local lords. As a result, significant economic and social differences emerged among peasants. Some possessed more productive land, others also kept cattle, and some combined artisanal work with agricultural activity during the lean season. As society became more differentiated, people were grouped into jatis or subcastes and ranked on the basis of their backgrounds and their occupations. Ranks were not fixed permanently and varied according to the power, influence, and resources controlled by members of the jati. The status of the same jati could vary from area to area. Jatis framed their own rules and regulations to manage the conduct of their members. These regulations were enforced by an assembly of elders, described in some areas as Jati Panchayat. But Jadis were also required to follow the rules of their villages. Several villages were governed by a chieftain. Together, they were only one small unit of a state. Region and empire. Large states like those of the Cholas, Tughlaqs, or Mughals encompassed many regions. A Sanskrit Prashasti praising the Delhi Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban explained that he was the ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Bengal, Gauda in the east to Ghazni, Gajana in Afghanistan in the west, and included all of South India, Dravida. People of different regions, Gauda, Andhra, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, apparently fled before his armies. Historians regard these as exaggerated claims of conquest. At the same time, they try to understand why rulers kept claiming to have control over different parts of the subcontinent. By 700, many regions already possessed distinct geographical dimensions and their own language and cultural characteristics. You will learn more about these in Chapter 7. They were also associated with specific ruling dynasties. There was considerable conflict between these states. Occasionally, dynasties like the Cholas, Khaljis, Tughlaqs, and Mughals were able to build an empire that was pan regional, spanning diverse regions. Not all these empires were equally stable or successful. Language and region. In 1318, the poet Amir Khusru noted that there was a different language in every region of this land. Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, Dwarasamudri in southern Karnataka, Telangani in Andhra Pradesh, Gujari in Gujarat, Malbari in Tamil Nadu, Gauri in Bengal, Awadhi in eastern Uttar Pradesh, and Hindavi in the area around Delhi. Amar Khusru went on to explain that in contrast to these languages, there was Sanskrit which did not belong to any region. It was an old language and common people do not know it, only the Brahmanas do. When the Mughal Empire declined in the 18th century, it led to the re emergence of regional states. But years of imperial pan regional rule had altered the character of the regions. Across most of the subcontinent, the regions were left with the legacies of the big and small states that had ruled over them. This was apparent in the emergence of many distinct and shared traditions. In the realms of governance, the management of the economy, allied cultures, and language. Through the thousand years between 700 and 1750, the character of the different regions did not grow in isolation. These regions felt the impact of larger pan regional forces of integration without ever quite losing their distinctiveness. Old and new religions. The thousand years of history that we are exploring witnessed major developments in religious traditions. People's belief in the divine was sometimes deeply personal, but more usually it was collective. Collective belief is in a supernatural agency. Religion was often closely connected with the social and economic organization of local communities. As the social worlds of these groups altered, so too did their beliefs. It was during this period that important changes occurred in what we call Hinduism today. These included the worship of new deities, the construction of temples by royalty, and the growing importance of Brahmanas, the priests, as dominant groups in society. Their knowledge of Sanskrit texts earned the Brahmanas a lot of respect in society. Their dominant position was consolidated by the support of their patrons, new rulers searching for prestige. One of the major developments of this period was the emergence of the idea of bhakti, of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of the priest or elaborate rituals. You will be learning about this and other traditions in Chapter 6. This was also the period when new religions appeared in the subcontinent. Merchants and migrants first brought the teachings of Holy Quran to India in the 17th century. Muslims regarded the Quran as their holy book and accept the sovereignty of the one God, Allah, who, whose love, mercy, and bounty embrace all those who believe in Him without regard to social background. Many rulers were patrons of Islam, and the ulama learned theologians and jurists. And like Hinduism, Islam was interpreted in a variety of ways by its followers. There were the Shia Muslims who believed that the Prophet Muhammad's son in law Ali was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community, and the Sunni Muslims who accepted the authority of the early leaders, caliphs of the community, and the succeeding caliphs. There were other important differences between the various schools of law, Hanafi and Shafi, mainly in India, and in theology and mystic traditions. Thinking about time in historical periods. Historians do not see time just as a passing of hours, days, or years, as a clock or calendar. Time also reflects changes in social and economic organization, in the persistence and transformation of ideas and beliefs. The study of time is made somewhat easier by dividing the past into large segments, periods that possess shared characteristics. In the middle of the 19th century, British historians divided the history of India into three periods: Hindu, Muslim, and British. This division was based on the idea that the religion of rulers was the only important historical change and that there were no other significant developments in the economy, society, or culture. Such a division also ignored the rich diversity of the subcontinent. Few historians follow this periodization today. Most look to economic and social factors to characterize the major elements of different moments of the past. The histories you read last year included a wide range of early societies: hunter gatherers, early farmers, people living in towns and villages, and early empires and kingdoms. The histories you will be studying this year are often described as medieval. You will find out more about the spread of peasant societies, the rise of regional and imperial state formations, sometimes at the cost of pastoral and forest people, the development of Hinduism and Islam as major religions, and the arrival of European trading companies. These thousand years of Indian history witnessed considerable change. After all, the 16th and 18th centuries were quite different from the 8th or the 11th. Therefore, describing the entire period as one historical unit is not without its problems. Moreover, the medieval period is often contrasted with the modern period. Modernity carries with it a sense of material progress and intellectual advancement. This seems to suggest that the medieval period was lacking in any change whatsoever. But of course, we know this was not the case. During these thousand years, the societies of the subcontinent were transformed often, and economies in several regions reached a level of prosperity that attracted the interest of European trading companies. As you read this book, look out for signs of change and the historical processes at work. Also, whenever you can, compare what you read in this book with what you read last year. Look out for changes and continuities wherever you can, and look at the world around you to see what else has changed or remained the same. Patron: an influential, wealthy individual who supports another person, an artist, a craftsperson, a learned man, or a noble. Habitat refers to the environment of a region and the social and economic lifestyle of its residents. Archive: a place where documents and manuscripts are stored. Today, all national and state governments have archives where they keep all their old official records and transactions. Cartographer: a person who makes maps. Thank you.